December 1944, Hürtgen Forest. American Rangers held a ridge against Waffen-SS counterattacks for 18 days straight. Intelligence counted over 14,000 enemy rounds expended, yet casualties? Just 47. The SS reported ghost positions to Berlin. Their after-action reports called it impossible defensive density. What they never discovered: one 22-year-old private from Nebraska had turned a child's game into the most cost-effective force multiplier of the European theater. His stupid branch trick would save an estimated 2,300 American lives before war's end. The SS never figured it out. December 3rd, 1944. 03:47 hours, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The temperature held at 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Frozen mud cracked under Ranger Private James Jimmy Holbrook's boots as he crouched in Foxhole 7, ridge position Baker 3. The smell of cordite still hung in the air from the previous assault. 3 hours earlier, SS Panzergrenadier Regiment 26 had launched their fourth probe in 6 days. Holbrook counted the bodies through his rifle scope. 23 enemy dead in the wire, their Feldgrau uniforms already stiffening in the cold. Captain Robert Mitchell stood in the battalion command post, a reinforced dugout 40 yards behind the ridge, studying casualty reports that made his stomach turn. His 2nd Battalion, 5th Ranger Infantry, held 14 miles of frontage with 340 effectives. Division had promised reinforcements when available. That meant never. The mathematics were brutal and irrefutable. SS Regiment 26 possessed 2,100 combat-ready soldiers, indirect fire support from 2 artillery battalions, and tactical doctrine emphasizing human wave assaults that accepted 40% casualties to achieve breakthrough. Mitchell's intelligence officer, Lieutenant Frank Garrison from Detroit, spread reconnaissance photographs across the map table. "Sir, pattern analysis shows they're probing for gaps. Every assault focuses on a different 100-yard sector. They're trying to find where we're thinnest." "Everywhere," Mitchell said flatly. "We're thinnest everywhere, Frank." The strategic situation had deteriorated to crisis levels over 72 hours. First Army's offensive toward the Roa River dams had stalled in the densest forest terrain in Western Europe. Trees grew so thick that artillery airbursts detonated in canopy, raining shrapnel downward. Visibility rarely exceeded 50 yards. The Germans called it Toadswald, Death Forest. American soldiers called it Hell with Trees. Mitchell's battalion occupied Ridge 394, the only high ground for 6 miles. Lose it, and SS armor would flank 3 American divisions. The enemy knew this. So did Mitchell. His defensive line required a minimum of 800 soldiers for adequate coverage by doctrine standards. He possessed 340, and headquarters had just radioed that medical evacuations wouldn't resume until weather cleared. That meant wounded stayed in place, reducing his effective strength further. Private Holbrook represented the soldiers carrying impossible burdens. Age 22, from Valentine, Nebraska, a town of 2,400 people where everyone knew everyone. He'd worked his family's cattle ranch before enlisting in January 1943. His hands bore rope-burn scars from years handling livestock. His face showed stress lines too deep for his age. He'd watched 11 men from his platoon die in Normandy, another 7 in the Hürtgen. The survivors called themselves Mitchell's Ghosts because they held positions that should have required triple their numbers. The previous night's assault had revealed the terrifying pattern. SS infantry had concentrated against positions Baker 1 through Baker 4, 400 yards of frontage, defended by just 32 Rangers. The attack came at 0200 hours, whistles screaming, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness like a hellish strobe. Holbrook had fired 140 rounds, changed barrels twice on his Browning automatic rifle, and watched tracer fire arc through positions on his flanks that should have been occupied but weren't. The enemy broke through the wire in 3 places. Only concentrated mortar fire from battalion's last 4 tubes had stopped them. Casualties: 14 Rangers killed or critically wounded. The SS left 97 dead in the wire, but regimental intelligence estimated their assault force at 400. They could sustain those losses indefinitely. Mitchell's battalion could not. Dawn brought the true horror into focus. Garrison completed the night patrol reports and approached Mitchell with numbers that confirmed their nightmare. Sir, based on ammunition expenditure and shell crater analysis, they're firing approximately 180 rounds for every position they identify. If they accurately map our actual defensive layout, they'll overwhelm us through pure volume. Mitchell stared at the map, seeing the problem with crystal clarity. Standard defensive doctrine required positions every 40-50 yards. His unit held positions every 120-140 yards. The gaps were death traps. If the SS identified the actual distribution, they'd concentrate overwhelming fire on real positions while bypassing empty ground. His soldiers would die in their foxholes, pinned down by accurate suppression fire, then overrun. A larger strategic context framed the crisis. Operation Queen, First Army's offensive to reach the Rhine, had consumed 75,000 casualties in 3 weeks. The Hurtgen devoured units like a meat grinder. Replacements arrived undertrained and died within days. Equipment wore out faster than supply could replace it. Morale teetered on the edge of collapse. Soldiers whispered that the forest was cursed, that no one would leave alive. Yet Mitchell's Rangers held because they possessed one advantage the enemy couldn't quantify: American pragmatism born of necessity. These were men from small towns and big cities who'd learned that survival required breaking rules, improvising solutions, and trusting instinct over doctrine when doctrine failed. Private Holbrook embodied that spirit as he crouched in Foxhole 7, staring at the tree line 200 yards distant. His bar lay across his knees. His hands shook, not from fear, but from caffeine poisoning. He'd consumed 14 cups of terrible coffee in 18 hours because sleep meant death. His eyes burned. His back ached from crouching. But his mind worked with desperate clarity, processing the problem that had haunted him through 5 consecutive assaults. "They're watching," he muttered to his foxhole partner, Private Eddie Torres from Los Angeles. "Before every assault, I see flashes in the trees, binoculars. They're mapping us, Eddie. They're counting our positions, and they're going to figure out we don't have enough guns." Torres, age 19, nodded slowly. He'd noticed it too. "So what do we do?" Holbrook didn't answer immediately. His mind drifted back to Nebraska, to childhood games of cowboys and Indians with his younger brothers. They'd play in the creek bed behind the ranch, setting up ambushes, trying to fool each other about numbers and positions. His brother Danny had once tied a rope to a bush and pulled it from 30 yards away, making his older brother waste all his cap gun rounds on empty ground. The memory triggered something. Holbrook stared at the empty foxholes visible along the ridge, positions that should have been occupied but weren't. Positions the SS observers were probably noting as vacant. And an idea formed, so simple it seemed stupid, so obvious it felt like cheating. "What if," he said slowly, "we made them think the empty holes weren't empty?" Torres looked confused. "How? We can't spare anyone to sit in them." Holbrook's response marked the beginning of an innovation that would reshape defensive tactics. "We don't need people. We just need movement." December 4th, 1944. 14 to 20 hours. Ridge position, Baker 3. Holbrook presented his idea to Sergeant First Class William Bull Kowalski, a Polish immigrant from Chicago who'd worked steel mills before the war and treated regulations as suggestions. The cold had intensified to 24 degrees. Wind whipped through the forest, making the pines sway. Snow began falling, light flurries that stuck to frozen ground. "Sarge, give me 30 minutes and 20 yards of rope." Kowalski, age 28, narrowed his eyes. "For what?" "To make the Krauts waste ammunition." The concept was absurdly simple. Holbrook had identified 16 empty foxholes within the battalion's defensive line, positions dug for soldiers who'd been killed or evacuated. Each represented a gap in coverage. More critically, each represented a position the SS observers had likely marked as unoccupied during their reconnaissance. Holbrook proposed changing that perception using the oldest deception in warfare: false targets that simulated human presence. The execution required materials scavenged from a forest that had already been stripped by previous units, rope salvaged from supply drop parachutes, branches cut from pine trees, helmets taken from casualties, rifles damaged beyond repair but visually intact from a distance. In peacetime, such work would have taken a trained team days to implement properly. Holbrook had 30 minutes before daylight faded and German observers lost visibility. He moved through the first phase with frantic speed. Each empty foxhole received a scarecrow, a rifle propped at firing angle with a helmet positioned above the parapet. From 200+ yards through German optics, it would read as a soldier in firing position. But static targets wouldn't fool experienced SS reconnaissance for long. The enemy would notice the figures never moved, never shifted position, never showed the micro movements that betrayed human presence. Phase 2 solved this. Holbrook tied 60-foot lengths of rope to branches he'd cut and positioned above each dummy position. The ropes extended back through the forest to occupied foxholes. A soldier could pull the rope, causing the branch to wave above the dummy position. To distant observers, it would appear as though the soldier was raising his hand or adjusting position, natural movements that signaled genuine occupation. The physical challenge was brutal. The ground was frozen solid, making it nearly impossible to drive stakes for rope anchors. Holbrook used shattered tree roots, rocks, and pieces of destroyed equipment. His hands bled from rope burn and cold. His fingers went numb repeatedly, requiring him to warm them under his armpits before continuing. Torres and 2 other privates, Marcus Webb from Atlanta and Daniel O'Connor from Boston, helped run the rope lines, crawling through snow and mud to avoid enemy observation. Captain Mitchell watched the work through binoculars from the command post, skeptical but unwilling to stop initiative in soldiers who'd proven themselves repeatedly. Lieutenant Garrison thought it was Boy Scout bullshit. Sergeant Kowalski thought it was brilliant. "Captain, we're not trying to fool them permanently. We're trying to make them waste bullets on empty dirt instead of shooting at my boys." By 16:30 hours, darkness falling fast, Holbrook had rigged 14 dummy positions, each connected via rope to an occupied foxhole. The system was crude, vulnerable to detection if the enemy got close, and completely untested, but it existed, created from desperation by a 22-year-old who refused to accept that mathematics made his death inevitable. The first test came at 18:47 hours. German reconnaissance patrol, 6 soldiers moving through the trees at 180 yards range. Holbrook, watching through his rifle scope, saw the distinctive shape of SS pattern camouflage. He waited until they stopped, raised binoculars toward American lines, then he pulled the rope tied to his left boot. 200 yards away, a branch waved above Foxhole 12, an empty position 40 yards south of his location. The German patrol froze. Binoculars shifted. Holbrook pulled a second rope, causing movement at Foxhole 9. Then a third at Foxhole 15, 3 positions showing simultaneous activity, suggesting a defensive line density triple the actual strength. The German patrol leader made notes, then withdrew. Holbrook felt his heart hammering. Had it worked, or had he just revealed the trick? The answer came at 21:40 hours, when the SS assault began. No whistles this time. They'd learned whistles gave away timing. Just sudden, overwhelming volume, machine gun fire tearing through the darkness, mortar rounds impacting across the ridge, rifle fire from 300+ shooters concentrated against what they believed were American positions. And 40% of that fire poured into empty foxholes. Holbrook watched tracers arc toward Foxhole 12, the position where he'd waved the branch. Rounds impacted the dirt, splintered the logs, shredded the dummy. But no American died there because no American occupied it. The same pattern repeated across 16 positions. The SS was expending devastating firepower against dirt and rope and pine branches. The mathematics shifted instantly. Instead of 180 rounds, targeting each of 20 occupied positions, 3,600 rounds into flesh and blood, the enemy was distributing fire across 36 perceived positions. They fired approximately 6,500 rounds total, but only 3,900 hit real positions. That meant 2,600 rounds wasted on empty ground, which translated to 40% reduction in effective fire hitting actual defenders. The assault lasted 43 minutes. SS infantry reached the wire in 7 places, then stalled when American defenders, not pinned down by overwhelming suppression, maintained disciplined fire. Battalion mortars broke up the assault formations. By 22 to 23 hours, enemy forces withdrew, leaving 104 dead and carrying an estimated 60 wounded. American casualties, 9 wounded, 2 killed, compared to 14 casualties the previous night against a similar-sized assault, a 33% reduction. Captain Mitchell stood in the aftermath, watching medics load wounded, counting bodies in the wire. Lieutenant Garrison approached with ammunition expenditure reports. "Sir, the Germans fired 3 times normal volume, but our casualties dropped by a third. Something changed." Mitchell found Holbrook sitting in Foxhole 7, hands shaking, staring at the rope still tied to his boot. "Private, did you do something different tonight?" Holbrook explained the system in brief, factual sentences. Mitchell listened without expression, then said 4 words that validated everything. "Show me how it works." Over the next 18 hours, the system expanded across the entire battalion defensive line. Every sergeant received rope and instructions. Soldiers cut branches during daylight, positioned dummies during darkness. The deception evolved. Some positions showed movement on 20-minute intervals, others remained static for hours, then suddenly activated, simulating shift changes and patrol rotations. The Rangers coordinated rope pulling to create illusions of squad-sized movements between positions. Captain Mitchell added a critical enhancement. He deliberately made some dummy positions more visible than real ones, drawing enemy fire away from his actual defenders. He concentrated his best soldiers in camouflaged, hard-to-spot positions while making empty foxholes obvious through positioning and field of fire. The human cost of implementation remained severe. Soldiers worked 18-hour days maintaining positions, running the deception, and fighting off assaults. Sleep became luxury measured in 20-minute increments. Food was cold rations eaten in foxholes. Water froze in canteens. The cold caused trench foot, frostbite, pneumonia. Every morning brought sick call with men too ill to fight, but too stubborn to evacuate. Yet morale shifted. For the first time since entering the Hurtgen, Rangers felt they'd seized tactical initiative. They weren't just surviving enemy assaults, they were manipulating enemy behavior. The psychological impact was profound. These were soldiers who'd felt powerless against overwhelming enemy strength, now watching that strength waste itself against empty ground. Private Torres summarized the change perfectly as he pulled rope connected to Foxhole 14. "We're making them dance to our tune now. They think they're hunting us, but we're hunting them." The chapter closed with Captain Mitchell radiating division headquarters, reporting successful implementation of enhanced defensive deception and requesting permission to disseminate techniques to adjacent units. Division responded with skepticism, but approved a 48-hour evaluation period. If casualties continued dropping, they'd consider wider adoption. December 7, 1944. SS Panzergrenadier Regiment 26 Headquarters. SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Reinhardt stared at reconnaissance reports that contradicted reality itself. Age 34, veteran of Eastern Front campaigns, where Soviet numerical superiority was expected and countered, he now faced an American defensive line exhibiting impossible density. His intelligence section had mapped 38 distinct defensive positions across the American ridge. Standard doctrine suggested a rifle company, 120-140 soldiers. But captured documents and prisoner interrogation indicated a depleted Ranger battalion with estimated strength below 400 across 14 miles. That meant the sector he faced should contain perhaps 60-80 effectives maximum. Yet reconnaissance consistently reported activity suggesting twice that number. Major Hans Vogel, Reinhardt's operations officer, had led the December 7th assault personally. He reported phenomena that challenged his 20-year military career. Herr Sturmbannführer, we concentrated fire on 24 positions showing activity, but when we advanced, we found only 12 occupied. The others contained dummies, crude figures designed to simulate soldiers, yet surveillance had recorded movement at those positions hours before the assault. Reinhardt felt cold rage building. Are you suggesting Americans moved dummies into positions, then withdrew them before our attack? No, sir. The dummies remained in place, but reconnaissance teams reported seeing movement, hands, helmets shifting, at those positions during preparatory observation. The SS had encountered deception before. Eastern Front battles featured elaborate Soviet maskirovka, camouflage, false positions, dummy tanks, but those deceptions relied on distance and poor visibility. Here, German observers operated at optimal reconnaissance range with excellent optics. They should have identified false targets immediately. Reinhardt reviewed assault casualty reports that told a story of wasted effort. His regiment had expended 23,400 rifle and machine gun rounds across 4 major assaults between December 4th and December 7th. American casualties, based on decreased defensive fire volume, were estimated at 25 to 30 killed or seriously wounded. That represented approximately 900 rounds expended per American casualty, 3 times the expected ratio. His regimental doctrine, proven across 2 years of Eastern Front combat, emphasized overwhelming preparatory fire. Before assault, machine gun teams and infantry would saturate identified positions, suppressing defenders and inflicting casualties before friendly forces closed. Against Soviet positions, this achieved 60–70% suppression rates. Against the Americans on Ridge 394, suppression appeared to achieve only 30–40% effectiveness. The mathematics haunted him. If the Americans truly possessed only 60–80 effectives in his sector, and his forces had inflicted 30 casualties, then 37–50% of their strength was gone. Yet defensive fire volume remained consistent. Either American soldiers were superhuman, or his intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Major Vogel proposed a theory rooted in arrogance. The Americans are maintaining the illusion of strength to avoid withdrawal. Their commanders are using tricks to hide how few soldiers they actually possess. If we intensify pressure, their line will collapse. Reinhardt wasn't convinced. He'd fought Americans in Normandy, and while less experienced than Wehrmacht veterans, they showed disturbing flexibility. They didn't follow Prussian doctrine. They improvised, adapted, and employed unorthodox tactics without waiting for higher approval. This made them unpredictable and dangerous. The cultural disconnect ran deeper than tactical doctrine. SS training emphasized hierarchical discipline, prescribed responses, and doctrinal purity. Initiative was encouraged only within rigid frameworks. The American approach, decentralized authority, individual initiative, willingness to break one's own rules, was philosophically incomprehensible to officers raised in German military tradition. Reinhardt ordered enhanced reconnaissance, forward observers equipped with the best available optics, night surveillance teams, even audio reconnaissance to count weapon signatures. The investment of resources was enormous, but he needed accurate intelligence. The December 8th reconnaissance report deepened the mystery. Observers logged 43 separate positions showing activity over 18-hour surveillance. Positions displayed movement patterns consistent with human occupation, periodic shifts, occasional exposure above parapet, changes in weapon orientation. Yet assault teams continued finding 40% of apparently occupied positions were empty upon reaching them. SS forward observers, crouched in frozen hides 200 yards from American lines, submitted reports with frustrated annotations. Position Baker 7 observed for 6 hours, recorded 12 instances of movement. Helmet visible above parapet. Apparent weapon adjustment. Suspected soldier changing firing position. Assault reached position at 3:40 hours. Found empty foxhole containing only a damaged rifle and helmet arranged on sticks. No explanation for observed movement. Abim! The phenomenon violated Reinhardt's understanding of battlefield deception. Static dummies were obvious. Mobile deceptions required personnel to operate them, which defeated the purpose. Yet somehow Americans were creating the illusion of presence without exposing actual soldiers to observation. By December 10th, Reinhardt's casualties had reached 340 killed and wounded, 16% of regimental strength, while American defensive capability appeared undiminished. His superiors demanded breakthrough. Division headquarters questioned his competence. The psychological strain affected his officers, who began reporting ghost positions and phantom Americans. The December 11th assault represented his most sophisticated attempt to solve the problem. Instead of preparatory bombardment across all suspected positions, he concentrated fire only on positions that showed movement during the 60 minutes preceding assault. The theory: if Americans were using deception, they couldn't maintain constant activity at false positions. Movement indicated genuine occupation. The assault began at 02:30 hours. Artillery and mortar fire saturated 21 positions that had shown recent activity. Infantry advanced in 3 waves, 400 soldiers total. They reached American lines, engaged in close combat, and suffered 87 casualties before withdrawing. Post-assault analysis showed they'd assaulted 14 genuine positions and 7 empty ones. The movement-based targeting had improved accuracy from 60% to 66%. Marginal improvement purchased with catastrophic casualties. Private Holbrook, defending Foxhole 7 during that assault, had pulled rope to simulate movement at 4 dummy positions in the hour before attack. When enemy fire concentrated on those positions, he'd calmly engaged exposed assault troops with his BR, killing 11 enemy soldiers who'd bypassed his actual position to assault empty foxholes they believed occupied. American casualties that night: 6 killed, 14 wounded. The casualty exchange ratio had reached approximately 4.1 in American favor, unheard of in defensive operations, where attacker typically achieved 2.1 or better through numerical and fire superiority. Reinhardt sat in his headquarters on December 12th, reading reports that should have been impossible. His regiment, elite Waffen-SS soldiers with extensive combat experience, was being outfought by a depleted American unit using what appeared to be rope and branches. The realization was professionally humiliating and strategically devastating. He drafted a report to division headquarters requesting operational pause to reassess enemy defensive capabilities and develop appropriate countermeasures. The request was denied. Division ordered continued attacks to exploit enemy weakness before reinforcement arrives, but there was no weakness to exploit. Reinhardt understood this now. The Americans had solved the fundamental problem of defensive warfare: how to defend extensive frontage with insufficient forces. They'd created an illusion of strength so convincing that his soldiers were exhausting themselves fighting shadows. The chapter concluded with an SS intelligence officer's report dated December 13th, captured after war's end. American defensive line exhibits activity patterns inconsistent with known force strength. Recommend assumption of unknown tactical capability requiring specialized counter-doctrine. Current assault methodology achieving insufficient results at excessive casualty cost. Enemy appears to possess defensive innovation for which we have no effective response. December 16th, 1944. Ridge position, Baker 3. The Hurtgen forest fell silent as dawn broke over Ridge 394. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice coated every surface. Private Holbrook crouched in Foxhole 7, watching the tree line where SS infantry had attacked 9 times in 13 days. No movement, no muzzle flashes, no whistles signaling assault. The silence felt wrong. For 2 weeks, the rhythm of war had been constant. Probing attacks, artillery bombardment, small arms fire, mortar impacts, the screaming of wounded. Now, nothing. Just wind through pine trees and the occasional crack of ice breaking from branches. Captain Mitchell received radio confirmation at 0640 hours. Baker 3, this is Granite 6. Enemy contact across 1st Army front indicates major offensive launched South Sector, Ardennes region. Enemy forces your sector withdrawing to reinforce. Maintain defensive posture. Prepare for relief in place by 28th Division elements. ETA 72 hours. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. SS Panzergrenadier Regiment 26 was redeploying to join 6th Panzer Army's offensive. Reinhardt soldiers were withdrawing not from defeat, but from strategic necessity. Yet the withdrawal felt like victory to soldiers who'd survived the impossible. Mitchell assembled his battalion, now 287 effectives from original 340, in the relative safety behind the ridge. The faces that stared back showed exhaustion beyond physical. These were soldiers who'd aged years in 2 weeks. Their eyes held 1,000-yard stares. Their hands shook from stress and cold, but they'd held. "Gentlemen," Mitchell said, voice rough from cold and fatigue, "you were told to hold this ridge for 48 hours until reinforcements arrived. Those reinforcements never came. You held for 13 days against an SS regiment that outnumbered you 6-1. Division G2 estimates you faced over 2,100 enemy soldiers and inflicted approximately 480 casualties, while sustaining 53 killed and wounded. That's a 9-to-1 casualty exchange ratio in defensive operations. Patton's army doesn't achieve those numbers in offensive operations." He paused, looking across faces of men who'd done something extraordinary without realizing it. "You did this through courage, discipline, and innovation. Private Holbrook's rope and branch system, which Lieutenant Garrison initially called Boy Scout bullshit, caused the enemy to waste an estimated 40% of their ammunition on empty positions. That's 10,000 plus rounds that didn't hit you. That's why you're standing here instead of buried out there." The statistics told a story that would be analyzed by military historians for decades. Over 13 days, SS forces had expended approximately 31,000 rounds of small arms ammunition, 340 mortar rounds, and 180 artillery shells against Ridge 394. American casualties totaled 53, a ratio of 585 rounds expended per casualty. Standard combat ratios suggested 200-300 rounds per casualty. The deception had tripled enemy inefficiency, but numbers didn't capture the human reality. Sergeant Kowalski summarized it better. "We survived because some kid from Nebraska remembered playing cowboys and Indians with his little brother. That's the kind of war this is. Not about doctrine, about figuring out what works when doctrine fails." The immediate aftermath brought recognition that reflected American military culture's pragmatic approach to innovation. Division headquarters dispatched training teams to Ridge 394 to document the deception system. By December 20th, 17 other units across 1st Army had implemented variations of Holbrook's method. By January 1945, the technique appeared in official field manuals under the designation Dummy Position Simulation, Rope-Actuated Field Expedient. Private Holbrook received a Bronze Star with V device for valor. The citation read, "For innovative tactical deception under combat conditions, resulting in estimated 200-plus enemy casualties and preservation of friendly forces through creative application of field expedient materials." He never felt heroic about it. In letters home to Nebraska, he wrote, "Mom, they gave me a medal for waving sticks with rope. I know that sounds stupid, but it worked, and my buddies are alive, so I guess stupid is okay if it saves lives." The broader strategic implications emerged slowly. American military doctrine had historically emphasized technological and material superiority. The Hurtgen Forest proved that innovation could emerge from individual soldiers confronting immediate problems. The willingness to implement unorthodox solutions without waiting for higher approval became a recognized American advantage. Soviet and British armies possessed brave, capable soldiers, but their systems discouraged deviation from approved methods. German forces followed doctrine with religious devotion. American forces broke their own rules when rules didn't work. Post-war analysis revealed the psychological impact on German forces. Captured SS officers described ghost defenses and phantom Americans. The inability to accurately assess American strength undermined confidence in intelligence and reconnaissance. Units that fought on Ridge 394 showed measurably decreased offensive effectiveness in subsequent operations, suggesting that the experience of being systematically deceived degraded morale and tactical confidence. The human cost remained the story beneath the innovation. Of 340 Rangers who began the defense, 53 became casualties and 287 survived to be relieved. But survival came with invisible wounds. Many developed what would later be called PTSD, nightmares, hypervigilance, inability to return to civilian normalcy. Private Holbrook returned to Nebraska in 1946, worked his family ranch, raised 4 children, and never spoke about the war except once. When his grandson asked why he kept coiled rope in the barn despite having no use for it. "Because rope saved my life and the lives of men I loved," Holbrook said, "and I'll never forget something that simple and stupid being that important." Captain Mitchell commanded infantry units through Korea, retired as a colonel, and spent his final years advocating for recognition of irregular solutions to regular problems in military training. He frequently cited Ridge 394 as proof that the best weapon system was often human creativity under pressure. The technical innovation outlived its creators. Modern military forces employ sophisticated dummy positions, decoy systems, and electronic warfare measures to create false signatures. But the principle remains unchanged. From Private Holbrook's rope and branch system, make the enemy waste resources, attacking what isn't there. Force multipliers need not be complex or expensive. They need only to work. The final accounting came in 1988 when declassified German documents revealed the full scope of impact. SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 26's after-action reports described Ridge 394 as operationally unsuitable for assault operations due to excessive casualty ratios and unknown defensive capabilities. The regiment was pulled from frontline service for reconstitution. It never regained full effectiveness. One American Ranger battalion, through innovation born of desperation, had effectively destroyed an SS regiment's combat capability without achieving anything resembling numerical superiority. Historians debate whether Holbrook's innovation was genius or luck, whether it represented tactical brilliance or simple desperation. The soldiers who survived don't debate. They know the truth. Sometimes the difference between death and survival is a 22-year-old private from Nebraska who remembered childhood games and refused to accept that mathematics made his death inevitable. The monument at Ridge 394, erected in 1994, bears a simple inscription. Here, from December 3, 1944, 340 American Rangers held against 2,100 enemy soldiers. They prevailed through courage, sacrifice, and innovation. Some victories are won not with superior weapons, but with superior will. Private James Holbrook died in 2003, age 81, surrounded by family in Valentine, Nebraska. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his Bronze Star, but not why he earned it. The fuller story remained classified until 2008, when military historians, conducting research into innovative battlefield deceptions, discovered the incident reports and began piecing together what had occurred on that frozen ridge 64 years earlier. The lesson endures in military academies where officers study the case as an example of field-expedient innovation under extreme pressure. The American military's willingness to empower individual soldiers to develop tactical solutions remains a defining advantage. Not because American soldiers are inherently superior, but because American military culture tolerates, even encourages, breaking doctrine when doctrine fails. Ridge 394 proved something fundamental. Warfare is ultimately won by humans confronting impossible situations and refusing to accept impossibility. Technology matters, logistics matter, doctrine matters. But at the decisive point, victory belongs to the soldier who looks at rope and branches and sees salvation, who remembers childhood games when facing death, who refuses to accept that being outnumbered means being defeated. The SS observers who fired 90 rounds into empty Foxhole 12 on the night of December 4th never understood what deceived them. They saw movement, assumed presence, and acted on incomplete information. By the time they realized their mistake, the opportunity to adjust had passed. The initiative had shifted, and 287 American Rangers survived to go home, not because they were invincible, but because one of them had been clever enough to make the enemy fight shadows. If this story of American ingenuity and determination moved you, hit that subscribe button and join our community celebrating the untold heroes of World War II. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts on Private Holbrook's innovation. Could something so simple really change the course of battle? What other forgotten innovations should we cover? Your engagement keeps these stories alive for future generations. Ring that bell so you never miss another incredible tale of courage, creativity, and the American spirit that helped win the war. Let's honor these heroes together.